Hi, I'm Linda Finaris, host of the B2B Brand 180 podcast and CEO of Millennium Agency, where you'll learn the latest tips on how to grow your business with marketing. Today, I'm excited to bring in Jason Greenwood of Greenwood Consulting. He helps establish B2B brands and ambitious funded startups capitalize on their digital and omni-commerce opportunities while also addressing some of the pressing challenges that are out there today. So he has something called Fit for Commerce, which we'll talk a little bit more about. It's a unique framework. It cuts through a lot of the time to market. He'll speak a little bit about that, but love to get started. Jason, do you want to take a few minutes and introduce yourself and tell the audience about you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting me, Linda. It's great to be along for the ride. Today, my name is Jason Greenwood. Been working in e-commerce for over 20 years. This is my 24th year working in the e-commerce space. Started out working agency side, had my own e-commerce pure play for 7 years. Went back into the agency space, have owned agencies, have built agencies, worked for some of the largest brands in the Australia, New Zealand region. I'm actually originally from Southern California, born and raised. Moved to New Zealand in my early 20s, lived there for nearly 30 years, and have now lived in Mexico with my wife and dog for the last year and a half. Live now in Puebla, Mexico, which is about 2 hours southeast of Mexico City. Absolutely love it here. But for the last 4 years, as I've built up my direct consulting practice and I've gone to market as an independent consultant in e-commerce, I've really doubled down on B2B e-commerce because all of the data points to, and this is from the Department of Commerce data in the United States, as well as DC 360 and a couple of other research organizations in the United States. B2B e-commerce is set to grow at about 10x the rate of B2C and D2C e-commerce over the next decade. So in terms of, I guess, where the opportunities sit today, what happened during COVID, what we saw was a lot of brands realized, oh my God, we don't have any digital routes to market. Our sales reps can't go out and meet people on site. They can't go knock on doors. They can't be in person. They can't be at conferences. They can't do all these things. And a lot of these B2B brands, they relied on field sales, they relied on customer service, they relied on all these things to be able to execute transactions and go and land new accounts. And all of a sudden, COVID came along and they had to really take a long, hard look at themselves and establish digital routes to market. And we're still benefiting from that transition today. At least I am in my consultancy.
So I know you work with a lot of brands on the technical, operational, and customer service experience side, and you use this framework called Fit for Commerce. And you're stating that it actually cut the time to market by, more than 25%. So can you speak a little bit about that? How this framework works? What is the foundation? Why is it so different? And why do you think our audience could benefit from something like?
Yeah, look, I've always believed, and in my experience has borne this out, that if you ask better questions, you get better answers.
Mhm.
And so I establish credibility and expertise with my clients by asking better questions than anyone else in the industry, or at least I'd like to think that I ask better questions than anybody else in the industry. And so my discovery process is really unique. The types of questions I ask, where I go into depth, is unique. But there's four primary pillars that we cover
Right.
off as part of this framework. It's people, it's process, it's
Mhm.
tech, and it's data. And usually when I go in, the first thing that I'll get my new clients, especially if they're merchant clients, now I consult also to investors and platform vendors and agencies, but when I'm working with sellers, B2B sellers that are selling product into marketplace, they're manufacturers, they're distributors, they're wholesalers, and they're selling to other businesses. One of the first things I get them to do is to export a sample set of their product data wherever they hold that product data. It could be in an ERP, it could be in a PIM system,
Right.
wherever they hold it. Get them to export, say, 50 products. Show me what a representative set of product data is. Then do the exact same thing for customer data. Export 50 accounts worth of data. Show me what that looks like. Walk me through that. Show me what attributes you have. Show me how you've structured your data.
Mhm.
And usually within about 15 to 20 minutes of looking at this data set, I can tell these businesses exactly where the majority of their problems are. Because the vast majority of these B2B brands, especially if they've never done digital commerce before, if they've maybe only sold via EDI or e-procurement, as opposed to a self-service e-commerce platform, their data is often an absolute disaster. So
Right.
we work from the standpoint of what is the customer experience you're trying to create? Do you have the data to create that customer experience? And if you don't, we start there. And we work
Mhm.
backwards from there. We look at organizational design, we look at process design, and then ultimately a lot of people that hire me, they think we're going to jump straight into technology. What
Right.
what technology do we need? What e-commerce platform do we need? What PIM do we need? What ERP do we need? What CDP do we need? What do we need to make all this stuff happen? And it's like, no, that's actually one of the last things we need to think about. We need to think
Right.
about the data, the customer experience, what we're trying to do, what types of services we're trying to surface to our customers, other than just the buy now button. Do we want to furnish the ability for them to search products, to be able to identify products, check inventory levels, place quote requests digitally, check order shipments digitally, to be able to lodge RMAs digitally, to be able to check the status of their credit account digitally, to check the MOQs for their unique catalog digitally. All these other services other than just the buy now button. And so we walk through all of those components of the
Mhm.
customer experience and what needs to happen there. And then we work backwards from there. And usually the last 3 steps that I go through as part of my Fit for Commerce framework is we do search and select for technology. We draft the BRD, the business requirements document, in line with taking advantage of the 80/20 rule.
Mhm.
I try to help brands select technology that can meet 80% of their business requirements out of the box without customization. Once we do that, and once we do the overall solution architecture of the stack, then I help them also do search and select for the right partners to actually do the implementation and be their partner and hold their hand through that implementation journey. So
Right.
that's really where my engagement usually ends
Yep.
with the
Yep.
merchant, because I don't have a team. I don't do development. I'm a pure consultant. I've run agencies and build agencies before. I'll never do that again. And so I then hand that over and we transition nice and smoothly from my consulting into an actual implementation. And there's a huge knowledge transfer that goes on there and handholding that goes on there.
So aside from your framework, if you were to, communicate or you were to make a recommendation to a B2B company, what would you say some of the major pitfalls would be that, they really need to keep their eye out? Because there are so many different aspects of what they need to look at. To your point, there's product, there's process, there's people, there's everything that goes around that. And there are a lot of elements that reflect that. However, there are a couple of areas that you see come up time and time again that are weak areas within companies that are going after that B2B market from an e-com side. What would you suggest that companies really consider?
There's 2 main areas that I see consistently overlooked by like 95% of the sellers that I work with. The first one is they haven't done any adoption planning at all before I usually get to them. They haven't even thought about adoption. And so when we think about the time and expense and the effort they put into these projects, they could be 100,000, 200,000, $300,000 projects pretty easily. They can go from 6 to 18 months. We're talking, these are big transformational projects for these companies.
Mhm.
And oftentimes they haven't thought about what we need to come up with an adoption plan internally and externally if we have a chance of getting any kind of ROI out of this level of investment. And
Right.
but by buy-in and getting people on the bus, I mean internally, usually where we see the most friction is in sales teams. They feel threatened, right? Anytime we're looking at adopting digital channels, they're like, well, you're going to try to fire me and replace me with an e-commerce website? Well, no, that's not the idea. But what we do discover when we start getting under the bonnet and we start digging into the meat of the operation, we find that anywhere from 20 to 60% of a
Mhm.
salesperson's time is spent on admin functions. It's spent on emailing their customers with price lists and PDFs and
Right.
information, and then taking, emails back or faxes back with orders, manually typing them into ERP systems, having to send out manual product information and catalog information. There's manually processing quote requests and RMA requests and all these things. There's a tremendous amount of things that salespeople do today that is pure admin. It adds zero value to the customer. And
Right.
so I usually, when I first walk into the room, salespeople are they hold up the cross and they say, this guy's here to replace us. This guy, they feel extremely threatened about any discussion around digital commerce. But when we start, usually that's how they feel about me when we start the discussion. But by the time we finish the discussion, I'm one of their best friends because I'm
Right.
a massive, massive advocate for sales teams. I'm a massive, massive advocate for humans. But I'm a massive advocate for humans doing the things that they are uniquely able to do, not
Right.
things that we should hand off to a digital services layer. And this
Right.
is where salespeople get excited because I'm like, hey, if I could free up 20 to 60% of your time so you can go out, you can visit more clients, you can go and knock on
Mhm.
more doors, you can go to more
Mhm.
baseball games and sit in box seats and take people out to dinner and go out and get drinks and do the schmoozing that you like to do to build the relationship with your customers instead
Right.
of all of this manual labor. I usually end up their best friend. So that's the first thing, right? We get we and I always actually encourage business owners and leaders to additionally incentivize orders that come through digital channels because the cost structure associated with that to the business is lower. And as a result of that, we should share in that efficiency with our salespeople. So we should
Right.
actually give them an additional incentive to say, look, it doesn't, if you've got a named account, doesn't matter what channel they place an order through, you're going to get your commission. But
Mhm.
if that order comes through e-commerce, EDI, e-procurement, if it comes through any of those channels, you're going to get an extra 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 points worth of commission. And I guarantee you, you want to create change within your sales teams,
Right.
you get what you incent. It's
Yeah.
that simple.
Yeah.
Incentivize them properly, they'll change. They'll go and sit inside the offices of their customers and handhold them through those first 2, 3 orders online to help them transition into those digital ordering channels. And it frees them
Yeah.
up for more time to build the relationship with that customer instead of handling the transactional aspects of the
Right.
relationship. So, and then there's the external adoption part of this, right? There is okay, or have we even canvassed, have we even talked to our customers? Do they care about e-commerce? What is their vision of e-commerce? How do they define e-commerce? What types of digital services are they actually looking for? Because if they're on EDI today, they might think, well, we already do e-commerce with you. We already do EDI.
Right.
Well, our ERP talks to your ERP and places orders. Why do we need e-commerce? Well, what about all these other services that you do today manually by sending us an email or picking up the phone and talking to us or doing a live chat to our customer service team? What if you could self-service all of those requirements through a buyer's portal where you can
Mhm.
go and check the status of your credit account and do all these other things that you want to do, but you could do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at your own convenience. Would that be
Right.
helpful? Does that benefit you? So when you start doing the homework on what it's going to take for this to become an impactful, beneficial project for both you and your customers, you actually have to have the conversation. And I find that many times these businesses, they make a ton of assumptions about what their clients want and need from them instead of just talking to them and asking them.
And to that point, I mean, it is B2B space on the commerce side is very complex. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a lot of unique business needs that you have to integrate with existing systems. There's all kinds of things that go on. So just, when I'm thinking when I walking the client through something like that, I'm assuming you go through some assessment and planning process. You're determining what the objectives are. You're doing your research. You're
Yep.
making sure you're getting everybody engaged in the process to make sure that you can move them along this process to your point. If you have people like maybe in sales that don't want to participate or are digging their heels and you've got to be able to build that relationship so they understand why you're there and you're there to help them in the long term. And then again, that gathering of information. The other piece of it that can be pretty complex and it depends on the client, I would assume, is the platform that's going to be used. There's so many platforms out there that could probably meet some needs depending on whether it's like something like Magento or it's a custom build platform. So those are all the pieces, and to kind of think about it from our listeners' perspective, there's sort of these multiple steps, I would think. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, let's assess, let's do our due diligence. Let's look at the platforms, getting everybody on board. Let's look at what's out there. Then you start to design and develop those platforms, figuring out what lines up. And then obviously it's the
Yes.
content and the data that has to go with that. And then training and onboarding and then launching and then what that really looks like for a company. It's not like you're going to throw together a B2B commerce site in a week and, get it out there and it's a big success because to your point, there's an internal aspect and then there's an external aspect. So I'm assuming when you get to the end and you've got something like this launch, you're monitoring and optimizing and making adjustments here and there and trying to continuously improve. Do you have processes in place to make sure that the actual end product is meeting the needs of the client and making sure, you're maximizing their ROI?
Yeah, I usually don't get too involved, unless the client brings me back in and they say, look, we want to look at additional integrations. We want to look at additional systems to augment the systems we have. Usually the support, the hypercare, the enhance and extend, because I don't do development.
Right.
Usually the implementation partner takes ownership of that post live experience, enhance, extend support. They
Yeah.
take ownership because they become the development partner of that merchant. And so
Right.
really I come with high level strategy, channel strategy, I come with go to market strategy, I come with a data strategy, I come with all these things in the beginning. I do, my initial discovery questionnaire is about 150 questions
Mhm.
that go tremendous amount of depth into each function within
Yep.
the business, goes into deep discussion around existing technology, existing integrations, existing data flows, workflows within the business, existing warehouse locations that we have to think about, existing channel integrations that we have
Mhm.
to think about. All these things. We cover all of this stuff and I meet merchants where they are. And sometimes it doesn't make sense for them to boil the ocean and rip and replace absolutely everything in their stack. Now, sometimes they'll bring me in they think I'm just there to maybe just look at the e-commerce solution because they think they're ready to do e-commerce. But when we dig under the bonnet, oftentimes we find that their back office systems, processes, and data are miles away from being ready for selling through digital channels, right?
Right.
It
I
can
get
absolutely be a disaster. And so
Mhm.
oftentimes we have to take 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. That's oftentimes the way that it is. And so sometimes when they bring me in initially and they think, "Oh, we're ready to go for e-commerce." Well, actually you're not. And here's the 53 reasons why
Mhm.
we don't want to build on quicksand. Here's the other things we need to put in place first to be able to support selling through digital channels, and not just selling, but also servicing the digital services layer for
Right.
our B2B buyers, right? And all across all these areas we've uncovered when we did our customer interviews to make sure that what we build is actually going to be adopted and used by our customers. Now, one of the other things that I find that is often a discussion I need to have is that CFOs are notoriously black and white about the ROI of big, large scale, high capex projects, right?
Mhm.
They say, okay, you tell me within the first 12 months of launch, what percentage of our orders and revenue is going to migrate from
Mhm.
physical and other channels to our digital channel. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm going to assess ROI on, right? That's what I'm going to assess TCO on. I'm going to
Okay.
assess all these things based on the adoption and migration that we're going to get from old world channels to new world,
Right.
right? That is very short-sighted for 2 primary reasons. One is they are not looking at the efficiencies that will be brought to the business and the reduction in costs and the greater margin that they will have on sales that they make through digital channels. Plus, they do not take into account the reduction in total customer servicing cost. The cost to serve on
Mhm.
average per customer has a value within these businesses. And if I can cut that cost to serve in half, which is a pretty achievable within 12
Right.
months, I can, on average, usually cut cost to serve about 50%
Mhm.
because all of these services that we're doing manually today, we
Yeah.
offload those to digital services layer. So this becomes a really, really important part of the ROI equation and therefore the TCO equation that we're doing these calculations based on. So again, CFOs usually, when I first meet them, they don't like me very much because I'm asking for a budget to be able to take them where they want to go, where they're telling me they want to go. And they're like, "Oh, well, hey, we've got to allocate budget for this, and we've got to go to the board, and we've got to vote on this, and all this sort of stuff." But what I find is oftentimes when they're drafting the business case around these solutions, they are very one-dimensional in nature. So I help to expand their thinking about the ways in which this is going to provide value back to the business and, more importantly, to the customer in ways that they've never even considered before. So
Right.
usually, again, when I first start talking to them, I'm not their favorite person, but by the end of the conversation, usually they're going, "Wow, very good point. I didn't think of it like that. I didn't consider these other elements that I have to consider if I'm going to think of this as an ongoing, and it's never a one and done project. Digital projects are never one and done, and you know this, right?
Right.
This is going to be a continuous investment and improvement program that will
Right.
never end, right?
Right.
Maybe the upfront cost, there's a little bump in that upfront cost as you get onboarded into these new technologies to start off with, but there will always be investment that you need to be making in new channels that your customers want to transact with you through. So
Right.
these are the kind of conversations I'm having, and they're a lot of fun to have because, as I said, sometimes consultants get a bit of a bad rap, especially consultants who have never actually been in the trenches, who have actually never done the doing, who have
Yep.
actually never been at the pointy end
Mhm.
of a digital implementation, who have never actually had to manage internal teams and get them on board and create the test and training plan and deliver that internally inside of a business. Who, you know, that's the real issue I see with many consultants out there. They're theorists, not doists. I'm
Yeah.
both, and
Yeah.
I've been at the pointy end. I've worked inside agencies. I've been inside brands, and now I have my own consultancy. And so I'd like to think that I have a unique level of empathy for these brands and the transformational challenges that they're going to go through and change management processes that they're going to have to implement within their business to get buy-in.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
have unique empathy there because I've actually been through this as a brand.
So if you were to give the audience one top tip, let's say they're not using a consultant, they're doing this internally, they've got staff in-house, they don't want a consultant, but they want to really do this correctly.
Yeah.
Is it one takeaway?
I think that brands oftentimes get caught up in the tech and the processes and all this stuff behind the scenes, and they start jumping straight into the deep end of the shiny new thing. There's a lot of FOMO out there. Oh,
Mhm.
well, my competitor runs NetSuite. I should run NetSuite. Oh, my competitor runs Magento or BigCommerce or VTEX or whatever it might be. Oh, so I gotta run that platform. Oh, they run the Syndigo PIM. Well, do I want to run that or do I want to run a Kenio? They jump straight to the tech. That is the kind of default setting inside these B2B brands, because
Mhm.
the tech side of the business, unlike in the B2C and D2C world, which digital projects are usually led by marketing
Yep.
or the e-commerce team, in the B2B world, they're run by IT, business systems,
Right.
the operational aspect of the business. And so therefore, that's what those people specialize in. They specialize in technology.
Right.
CEOs, CIOs, these are the people that lead these digital transformation change projects inside these B2B brands. And so they jump straight to the tech because that's what they know and that's what they love. And it's a chance to consolidate their power within the business, because if they own the digital commerce channels, well, that gives them more authority and a bigger budget, right?
Yeah,
The
exactly.
pro- the problem is most of these brands don't think about the customer experience they're trying to create. That the tech is the last thing we need to think about. We need to think about what is the experience we're trying to create here first, and then
Mhm.
work backwards to the enablement technology from there.
Yeah, that's a great point that you're making. Well, thank you very much, Jason. That was awesome. I just want to thank our audience today for tuning in to the B2B Brand 180 podcast. We hope you found the insights and strategies shared today to be valuable and actionable. If you like what you heard, please hit like, share, or subscribe. Thanks so much, Jason. I would love for you to share how our audience can get in touch with you.
Love it. LinkedIn, I post content almost every single day to LinkedIn. Jason Greenwood on LinkedIn. They can find me there. Have my own podcast called The E-commerce Edge. We've got over 400 episodes. So if you're interested in e-commerce, look that up on any podcast channel and YouTube. And then, of course, my website, greenwoodconsulting.net. But, if you're just wanting to learn about me or have a chat with me, link up with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Again, I'm Linda Faneras, host of the B2B Brand 180 podcast and CEO of Millennium Agency, which you can visit us at mill.agency or lindafaneras.com. I'm always here to help answer any questions that you may have, so feel free to reach out. And thanks again for listening to the B2B Brand 180 podcast.